So welcome back guys to We Talk Boxing, and today I'm going to be talking about the up and coming fight between Chris Billam-Smith and Gilberto Ramirez. So this fight between Chris Billam-Smith and Gilberto Ramirez is a unification bout where the current champions in the division there's four to be precise, but we're only going to be talking about two of them in this video. Chris Billam-Smith with the WBO and Gilberto Ramirez with the WBA. So it is a unification fight and the first in the division so far. But it's a very good competitive fight between both guys. Um, who are, I should say as well, similar in age. Gilberto Ramirez is 33 according to BoxRec, and Billam-Smith is 34. So yeah, a year apart between the two. But for me, I'd probably say that Chris Billam-Smith, for some reason, just looks a little bit more youthful, especially when he fights as well. Doesn't really look as if he takes too much damage as well. But as I mentioned a moment ago, this is a unification bout. So both guys aren't currently ranked, obviously, in any of the other governing bodies, but are ranked in the Ring magazine ratings. And the champion is Jaya Pataya, and then number one is Chris Billam-Smith. They have in the Ring magazine for the cruiserweights Gilberto at number 3. Currently the WBC champion Noel Mikalelian, I butchered his name. The WBC champion is number 2 in that. So yeah, it's a good competitive fight from my point of view. But I see it as a passing the torch type of fight because I feel as if this is just my own personal perspective that Chris Billam-Smith is gonna hopefully, if he gets past Gilberto Ramirez, go on to achieve good and or excellent things in the cruiserweight division. Before maybe even contemplating a move up to heavyweight, because we know that Lawrence Okolie has done that recently as well. But in terms of Chris Billam-Smith, he's done quite a few interviews, and he himself does believe the same as what I believe. He has to get past someone like a Gilberto Ramirez to even contemplating thinking about unifying the other belts, or potentially even facing the main man in the division, and that is Jaya Pataya. So for him, he has to go out and do a job, and I fully believe that he will. And it's a case where if he could look half decent doing it, then he may entice either the other champion, that Michelinium, the WBC champion, or maybe even Jaya Pataya in the ring. Now, Jaya Pataya has obviously done his own interviews, and he's come out and said that he's offered Chris Billam-Smith X, Y, and Z amount of money, but he obviously, not him maybe directly, but his team declined that fight, and obviously they chose to fight Gilberto Ramirez instead. But that is a future fight which I do believe will happen, and it would be nice as well if Jaya Pataya's next fight could probably be against the WBC champion. So if these two guys could have a unification fight, and the winner then fights the winner of the Gilberto versus Chris Billam-Smith fight, then we could have a undisputed fight at some point, maybe towards the end of next year. But anyway, getting back to the matter of hand. Now, Chris Billam-Smith is coming off some very good wins recently. His most notable one in his last fight was against Richard Riakporhe, where he schooled him, I believe, in 12-round unanimous decision. The scorecards don't reflect that though, but watching the fight live, Richard Riakporhe he didn't have no answers, you know what I mean, for Chris Billam-Smith's style, and he just couldn't let off his big shots. And it was a really easy fight from my point of view for Chris Billam-Smith, because I actually thought that Richard Riakporhe was going to cause him a lot more harm and potentially even maybe get a knockout. I actually thought he was going to catch up with Chris Billam-Smith at some point and maybe knock him out, but it wasn't to be, and Chris Billam-Smith was the victor. But he's been in there with other good opponents as well. He had a very tough fight before the Richard Riakporhe fight against the Masternak, which went 8 rounds. It was a very tough round until he managed to get him out there. And then obviously prior to that, he fought Lawrence Okolie, who was again one of the main men, or I should say the main man in the cruiserweight division, until he lost to Chris Billam-Smith. So for me, I would probably say that Chris Billam-Smith is probably on the better of the form in terms of both fighters, because he's fought probably two of the best cruiserweights currently. Whereas we know about, well, I know a lot about Gilberto Ramirez because I've seen him fight a few times, but hopefully you guys do as well. He's only lost one fight today in 47 fights, so excellent record, I should say. 46 wins, 30 KO, so he's a big puncher as well. But he's moved up in terms of weight. Now, it was pretty much after, I think it was the Joe Smith Jr. fight, give or take. He moved up. He obviously suffered that loss back in 2022 against Dimitri Bivol. Unanimous decision loss to him. He absolutely got his head boxed. And then he come back with a 10-round unanimous decision win over Joe Smith Jr., who I just mentioned, before fighting Guderian as well. I think he was the WBC champion prior to Gilberto Ramirez beating him, and he beat him on a unanimous decision. From the scorecards, it looked as if he boxed the head off him. I didn't watch the fight, so I can't really make my own judges. But yeah, he is a champion. But for me, I'd say it's a clash of styles in terms of this fight. I was gonna say Billy Joe Saunders. CBS, Chris Billam-Smith, has good boxing fundamentals, and is very stubborn and is very gritty in terms of he's quite durable as well. He can box, he can mix it, he can stay in the pocket. He's got a very, very good jab, and he does carry some power as well, so he could test Gilberto Ramirez. But as I mentioned a moment ago, Gilberto Ramirez has got power himself, but I'd say that he's more on the older side. Not older in terms of age, but in terms of where he's been. He's had 47 fights, and quite, you know what I mean, 15, 16 of those fights have 15 of those fights have gone the distance. So he's had some tough time in terms of the boxing ring. But yeah, he's got some decent guys on his records. So yeah, it's a case where this fight would tell us where both guys are in their career and who's going to progress. Now, this fight doesn't mean that the loser is done and dusted. It just means that they may have to just probably rebuild, have another get me back into it fight before maybe challenging again for another world title. But for me, I'd say the future is potentially bright for Chris Billam-Smith. Hopefully, if he could get past Gilberto Ramirez and maybe challenge another Unification or Undisputed, depending what happens with the other champions as well, and then maybe even hopefully at some point progress up to heavyweight as well. But my thoughts in regards to this fight it should be a very good competitive fight and a good competitive card. I do believe that Chris Billam-Smith will win the fight. I believe it will go points. But I won't be surprised if Chris Billam-Smith touches canvas in this fight, because Ramirez can punch and his record suggests that, so I won't be surprised. But I do feel as if he does touch canvas maybe once or twice, who knows, that he will have the stubbornness, the grittiness, the determination, the boxing skill, good fundamentals to get himself back into the fight and to win majority of the rounds. Rounds to hopefully win the fight. But that's my thoughts. You guys can let me know yours, and as always, please subscribe and comment. Bless.